Gutty Morgan, it is the start. No, it is the hump of the week. We're getting there. These two early mornings are not good for Timuchin and not good for me. Probably not good for Trevor either, but we're here. We're doing it. It's Wednesday, and it's a game day, which at least makes it more palatable to be up this early. It's Wednesday, the 20-something of something. That's as far as I go with dates this early in the morning. Trevor, how are you?
Not too bad, sir. Yourself? Other than the sleepiness, it's just my default thing. We're both just
literally just
on autopilot. Yeah.
So not a huge amount of news today. One thing we could talk about is just an update to what we talked about yesterday, which is basically that the Michael Edwards story turns out to have been a bit of a fabrication. And he isn't going to Manchester United, but Chelsea had serious talks with him, it turns out, rather than that just being speculation. How do you feel about? I mean, it's great that he's not going to go to United. But I think we said yesterday, Chelsea is at least a bit of generally a bit of a basket case in terms of personnel in the background, being fired and changed, etc.
They just picked up somebody. I'll check that out. It's all of this stuff came out afterwards of he didn't go there, and now they just named another sporting director, I believe. I'll find it, but
it's good news. It's good news for us in terms of our relationship to somebody who played such an important part in their recent success. But also, you kind of hope that he, will go abroad maybe, and as we speculated yesterday about fallings out, possible reasons for etc. But going to a big European club, or maybe not the Real Madrid, Barcelona level, but the level below that, if there are no damaged relations, might actually help us in the longer term, really, wouldn't it? Do us a few favors, especially with young players.
Give you a little pipeline to a different country.
Maybe something mutual. But the big thing for us today is game day. It is Champions League day, and Klopp has come out and said something which to me is quite surprising. But yet again, as we talked yesterday, a hint that maybe things in the background not being as fantastic as we all thought. So Klopp bemoans Keita and Oxlade-Chamberlain injury misdiagnosis, and what he says is that they're about not in the Champions League squad anyway, because everybody told me they would be out for longer, and now they are back. I mean, that's not good, really, is it?
Yeah, it's definitely a miscommunication between the training staff and, the guy in charge of putting the people on the field. And especially with those two guys who have checkered injury histories, and you kind of need to be shot straight with them. No real gray areas. Just like, are they good or are they not? You can't be like, oh, he's like 71%. That with them, it's either good or not. There's.
I remember having arguments with friends years ago. Number one, it really started with Hodgson, because Hodgson seemed to put too much stock, but almost in a complaining way, on the medical team. Especially when Gerrard was injured, and he'd be asked in the press conferences when Gerrard is coming back, and he'd say, we'd like him to come back, but the medical team have told me X, Y, Z. I also remember the whole thing around Sturridge when Brendan Rodgers was the manager, and not that we're bashing him. That the whole that again involving Hodgson as the England manager, saying he wanted to test his resolve, and that's why he played him in a friendly or something like that. And Rodgers was livid because, according to the Liverpool treatment team, he wasn't ready to play yet. And it always just struck me that there's Rinus Michels, the great Dutch coach, had a great coaching book called Team Building, and in it he said the thing that destroys teams and clubs' momentum is departments and coaches and players having these little kingdoms, he called them, where everybody's looking after their own specific area of the game and not sharing the knowledge so that the whole team can combine for success. And it just seems sometimes that medical staff, as you said, they're thinking in terms of, this player's 75% ready or 89% ready, or he can play 21 minutes and this one can play 47 minutes. And it just seems sometimes that there is a breakdown in communication between what the manager needs and what the medical staff want to say. What do you think about that?
Yeah, and that's happened a lot with a lot of the teams that I root for. There's just a disconnect sometimes where it's either the medical staff has like a directive and they go, all right, regardless of any situation, if you put your stamp on this player that they're okay, the team can do whatever they want with them. But if you come in and you express any concerns at all, even if the player goes, yeah, I can give it a go. I may not be 100%, but I'm fit enough to get it on the field. But sometimes they whether it's they're covering their own ass, where like, oh, if something goes wrong and then it falls back on them. Yeah, there's, like you said, there's a lot of guys that are looking after themselves rather than looking after the collective. And in some instances, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because you kind of want to have that bit of self-preservation, but it can only go so far before everybody is doing it, and then there is no more collective.
It seems to be as well, like it's probably not often done in a malicious way, but it always sounds like, when my doctor tells me to lose weight, and she's very stern about it, and when I go in for another checkup, it's like, I'm doing this and I'm doing that, and it like, it's somebody who doesn't understand what it's like to lose over 100 pounds of fat. Doesn't understand, like, the specifics of what I need, because otherwise I'd be eating one fig a day or something ridiculous. But in terms of, the medical staff, sometimes in all the clubs, but it's almost like they don't seem to understand that the manager needs to get the players on the field. Otherwise, he may lose his job, because they're quite often the best players are the most useful, because the worst players he's not going to care about whether they're on the treatment table or not, because they're not hurting them at that point. But it does seem that the objective, there is almost a dilemma for the medical staff and the fitness staff on clubs. Do you think that they can't quite strike the balance between the medical needs of what is essentially their patient and the actual global needs of the club itself, which is to win games?
Yeah, and like you said, there's not going to be big arguments and hubbub over a squad player and whether or not they're available or not. But there's times where there's guys that are really, really valuable to the club that just get on that snail's pace of recovery, and you go and you try to get something out of the medical staff in terms of just a statement or anything, and it'll just be the most just boilerplate, not fit, or there's no explanation of, well, they kind of have this going on that could potentially be a setback if they come back too early. So you kind of have that picture painted for you. Instead, you're just going, oh, he's just, if he goes on the field, like he's going to die or something. It's so, yeah, there just needs to be, I think, a bit more communication and just a bit more transparency with it. And I think both the club, the fans, and everybody involved would be, I think, a little better for it.
In terms of, that kind of dilemma for the medical staff, from the player's perspective, if you talk to any player or read any interviews or read any of their biographies when they retire, the players always want to get on the field. Like they always want, and they will maybe sometimes even lie about how well they've recovered, in order to get that little extra few days of recuperation out so that they can get back to playing a lot quicker. How important do you think it is for that balance to be struck between all three parties to make sure the player, is actually able to play and, may 2%, 5% risk an injury, and then a player who, if they go on the field, they are actually going to end their careers?
Yeah, and there are times where you got to save a guy from himself, because there is that drive within, like I said, the majority. We're not going to say all, because there's some that would probably love to just keep getting them checks and sitting on the sidelines all the time.
Aquilani.
Jeez, Alberto Aquilani reference at 8:11 in the morning. Didn't have that on my bingo card for today.
You can tell I'm waking up.
Yeah, that's you just wake up Aquilani. That's you got to save some guys from themselves, but there also has to be a thing where the medical team, like I was talking about, like just the cover your ass type deal, they have to kind of understand sometimes that players do want to get out there, and if it's something where it is a calculated risk, but it's one they're willing to take and they're willing to put themselves on the line, that there shouldn't be blowback to the medical staff of it. And there has to just be those assurances between everybody of, hey, I'm going to go play. You haven't given me the 100% green light to go, but this is something that I feel I can do in this moment for my team and give them enough so we can go win. And yeah, you've not put your stamp of approval on it, but you can rest assured that it won't come back on you if I go out there and like 20 minutes in I get hurt, because this is a decision that I made and not one that you kind of falsely pushed me out there saying I was okay.
Moving on from that speculation, but injury related anyway, and then leading us into the game. It seems like we may possibly have Kanate and Nunes at least back for today. Yeah. How long they play for, if they play any part whatsoever, it's still good that we have those two back, isn't it?
1,000%. They were sorely missed this past weekend. Could have used both of them even in a substitutes role in the game that will not be named. Tonight, I really feel that you got to stick Darwin up front and you got to put Kanate in next to Virgil. Just kind of throw them back into the fire with both feet. I don't think either guy should be coming off the bench tonight.
In terms of what they add for, I mean, we really just need a draw today. And you kind of have to assume that Napoli will probably win their game as well anyway, against Rangers. But although with Celtic doing not terribly well in the Champions League, maybe Rangers want to get one up and just end up with more points than Celtic did in their group. But in terms, we probably don't need to risk them if we don't need to. But at the same time, it would be nice to get at least Kanate back up and running. I mean, we've seen Darwin do his thing, but Kanate we haven't seen enough of this season, and we have been conceding goals at an inordinate rate. So between the two, who do you think would be the most important to get on the field and get the minutes into the legs?
I agree that Kanate is the more important guy to get minutes, and why I said I'd rather see Darwin in a starting role just to kind of get him back in that flow. If he came off the bench as a late guy to either chase a goal or kind of see it off, I'm fine with that. But yeah, Kanate is the one that needs the start more than Darwin does.
In terms of Matip and Thiago, it seems like they're close to coming back. As much as we've talked about Kanate, I mean, we'd like to see Matip back as well, just for the options.
Yes.
But considering the game that shall never be named, we kind of really do need Thiago back in there, don't we?
Yeah, that was very evident from that as well. Is that kind of just need his calm, his presence, and his passing to kind of just get things. If you're not just gonna rely on the Allison assist, you're gonna just have to find that guy that makes those passes instead of having to run the ball up to the next level of the midfield.
Just the Allison assist is what we used to call the long ball back in my day. But talking about moving on to the game then and talking about the game tonight, as we said, we don't need to win. Sometimes that's a great position to be. Well, it is a great position to be in because it means we've done the work beforehand for the most part. But it's also a dangerous position to be in because sometimes it can lead to a little bit of complacency, do you think?
Yeah, I hate the we only need a draw because it usually just leads to either a boring game or that bit of complacency where things get out of hand quick and then really it just spirals out of control. Usually a guy gets hurt, and that's something that we need not in any way, shape, or form coming out of this game is another body on the sidelines. That I really hope that they just come out in the front foot and try to score early and then kind of keep that pressure on. Not necessarily the heaviest of heavy metal football, but one of those games where you kind of just don't stay in first gear the entire time.
In terms of the performance level from the game that shall never be named, what are you looking for in terms of how we're going to play? Do you think we stick to the 4-2-3-1 that seemed to serve us really well? And I don't think we played it exactly that way at the weekend. Or do you think maybe we go back to 4-3-3 or something completely different, even maybe for this game?
Yeah, and I think it's dependent on whether Darwin plays or not. If it's going to be Bobby up front, I think 4-3-3 is the way to go. So you kind of give Mo that little bit more freedom, and because the Champions League has kind of been where he's kind of got himself going, and I don't know why it's not translating to league play, but it's something where he can go get a couple good chances, get one of them to go in tonight. I think that'd be really helpful for him more than anything. The team obviously would love the goals, but I think he just needs that little confidence boost that we keep thinking that his hat trick against Rangers was going to be it. The goal against City was going to be it. And then just lays 2 eggs against West Ham in the game that will not be named. And I think Mo needs to just have the ball fed to him as much as possible today. And if Darwin's up front, having him kind of have that space behind is good. But if it's Bobby up front, I think a 4-3-3 works.
If we just have a quick look at the Champions League table there, it seems to me that Rangers would have to score an inordinate amount of goals against Napoli just to get past Ajax and goal difference. If it came down to that, I think it comes down to head-to-head, though, doesn't it? So Rangers are pretty much out. Ajax can't catch up with us. Maybe again they'd have to have a harsh goal swing. Well, it almost seems like it's made for a nothing kind of game, doesn't it? Where both teams have some skin in the game, stake, but the steak isn't the skin, by the way. Not if I'm cooking it. But it seems like it's set for a dull bore draw. Ajax just want to get into the Europa League in that third place spot. Liverpool just want to qualify in second place at least, and then we'll see what happens after Christmas. But we've had those kind of predictions before about games, most notably in the 2001 UEFA Cup final, where it was supposed to be two defensive counter-attacking teams that were going to give everybody, serve them up as a nil-all bar fest, and it became one of the greatest European finals of all time. Do you think it's going to be one of those things where we do just, both teams just go, let's just not get injured, whatever the score is, or do you think it's going to be let's go for it?
In most cases, I would say this has 0-0 written all over it, just because that gets Ajax through to the Europa League, and that gets Liverpool through to the round 16. But they have Rangers on the final day, and that could make up a lot of goal difference really quick if they go thump them. So I think this is a game that shouldn't be kind of trifled with, because if Ajax, and we have a troubling consistency in letting in the first goal, and if that kind of gets out of control and Ajax goes and wins like 3-0, and then they have Rangers on the last day, and and I know Napoli may not have anything to quote unquote play for on the final match day, but a chance to like potentially send somebody home, that's as good of a motivator as progression sometimes.
In terms of the score line, what do you, just outside of everything we've talked, or what does your gut tell you the score line is going to be?
I definitely have 1-goal vibes, either 2-1 or 1-0. But I'm leaning towards 2-1 just because a clean sheet feels like a fever dream, even though they had two of them in the past week. It doesn't seem like they were real. So I'm gonna go 2-1 to Liverpool, but I'm very shaky on that front.
How does that lead on to the weekend? Let's say we have Leeds, isn't it, on Saturday?
Yes.
Yeah, we have
Late game on Saturday.
Poor Jesse Marsh. But yeah, in terms, if we have a good performance today, do you think that sets us up for Saturday for another good performance to try and make the game that shall not be named just a blip? Or if we have a poor performance, do you think we're going to come storming back against the team that's clearly in trouble? Or are we just going to be like we have been all season? And at some point, we have to just recognize that we've just been incredibly inconsistent.
Yeah, I think that inconsistency is going to be what is written on the gravestone of this season. Just up and down, the world's saddest roller coaster. I really hope that today is not a pivot factor for this weekend. It's a Leeds team that is in desperate times. They are really trying to just do everything they can to not have to sack Jesse Marsh, even though it's becoming more and more just, I don't know, bantered about that he is probably the next guy in the league to go. I personally think that would kind of be counterintuitive for them if they're going to, because they're trying to be that kind of like American pipeline. And if you want to get those players there, and the first chance you get, your American manager goes and gets sacked because of, not a great run of form, but it's something where they're not getting like absolutely pasted every game. And it was coming off a victory of Chelsea that all of this crap came down. So I don't know. I think it's something though where I was thinking after the West Ham game, where it was kind of a gritty battle, that they would go and show something, and they didn't. So I don't even know what to think anymore.
I mean, I would say, just to go more towards Leeds, is looking at him on the sidelines and looking at him in the interviews, it almost feels like this is the first time he's ever felt actual real pressure in his job, doesn't it?
Yeah, in the States, he was a guy that was never one to mince his words, and then he got in that Red Bull system overseas from the Red Bull in the States, obviously. But it's one of those things where, yeah, I don't think he's ever felt pressure because he's always had that escape hatch, and he's always kind of had that progression tree where he could just keep going to the next step. And now he doesn't have a step to go. It's just kind of a fall off a cliff if he's meant to fall. And they're in the drop zone. They're leaking goals. They're not scoring as much as they should with the offensive firepower they have. I don't know. I'd hate to see us be the death knell for him, but if need be, it should be.
It is a thing we do, though. To be fair, we do tend to get managers sacked after a game against us. We've a long history of it, I think, at this point.
Got one this year.
That's true. But in terms of our particular outcomes for Liverpool, which would you rather have? Would you rather have a stressful, maybe 1-0 defeat today, but which doesn't really affect us going into the last game against Napoli, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then have a barnstormer against Leeds, which unfortunately will put Jesse Marsh out of a job probably. Or would you rather have just wrap up the Champions League tonight and then have another typical Premier League, we don't know what the hell's going on game against Leeds? Which way would you prefer?
Yeah, I'm kind of in the camp of all the eggs in the Champions League basket right now. I'd rather get this one just sealed up, and whether that's a draw or a win, I would rather have that and then deal with the stress this weekend, because not to say that the league is completely done and dusted. Top four is not out of the realm of possibility by any stretch of the imagination, but it's one of those things where I'd rather have one thing secured rather than not.
Moving on to the next story, which is it's an interesting one because it could have gone so many different ways, but the FA have decided to take no action against Jordan Henderson and Gabriel from the Liverpool Arsenal game. I mean, that it's a good thing because we know from a bitter experience how the FA tends to adjudicate things on the field when Liverpool is concerned. But there were hints and allegations, as Paul Simon would say, about what was said between the two, including the spectre of racism, which was almost certainly just gutter journalism and social media nonsense. But what do you make of that? I mean, it was clearly enough that they were going to get an investigation. But we know Jordan Henderson, and we know he doesn't tend to be a very controversial player. Do you think that sometimes you have to stop relying on social media and the British press in particular and how they like to store things up before we make judgments on these kinds of situations?
Yeah, and it was one of those things where everybody involved on like the periphery of the incident, like Arteta said, like it's done. What was said on the field is we're good, we're going. But then everything kind of just kept going and going, and then the press kind of forced the FA's hand to like, hey, they did this thing and blah blah blah, and you need to go look at it. And that I almost like forgot that there was an ongoing investigation. I thought it was done and dusted in like a day. So when I saw that this morning, I'm like, okay, so what I thought was going to be the case about a week ago is now the case now. Cool.
I mean, it seems that like we know that if you followed English soccer for any length of time, any decent length of time, you know that the English press is really some of the worst dregs of society, let alone the worst dregs of journalism. But there is, from our perspective, there always seems to be an anti-Liverpool bias, especially in the London press. And it's almost like they can't wait for something like this to happen so they can write about Liverpool. Do you think it's something that maybe the club has to address publicly, or something that we just, we know we're in the right, so let's just let it go?
Yeah, and there's there's some publications where you're never going to win their favor, and that's fine because you don't want it or you don't need that validation. But it is something that you kind of just, when these incidents come out, you try to like look at it objectively, even as a fan of the club, and you're going, okay, if he did something where it was like, even if it was incredibly out of character. Hold on, sorry, apologies, but yeah, everybody at the time said that it was nothing. So the fact that it became anything, yeah.
Typical media-driven nonsense. So I think with that story, it just remains to make our last minute predictions for the game today. You say 2-1,
Yes.
Liverpool's favour, I'm assuming.
Yes.
I'm going to say 3-1, but I don't know which way that's going to go. It really could go either way. But I hope it's to us so we can wrap that up and then, have a bit of relaxation next week and maybe, I was going to say play the reserves, but we're running out of reserves at this point against Napoli. Just get ready for the Leeds game. But Trevor, have a good day. We'll see you again tomorrow for the second last day of the early week. And there's no way I'm going to be awake for it again, but however, we're here. And then hopefully we have something positive to talk about tomorrow, and maybe a few more injured players coming back. Because it's always nice to get that news. I wouldn't put my house on it, but we'll see what happens. Have a good day, everybody. Make sure you like, subscribe.
Hit all the buttons.
Facebook, YouTube, hit all the buttons. Spotify, to the podcast on Spotify. We have the Tourist Night podcast tomorrow night with me and possibly new dad, Jamie. So that should be good. And enjoy the game today, and let's hope it's a good one for Liverpool. Peace out, everybody.
Have a good one.